Okay, folks. Nothing can stop us now.
Yeah.
Not rain or wind or
No rain or wind.
wind or dark.
Okay, I hope you're seeing Frankopan again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I accept your challenge, Frankopan, because my first slide is going to show the weather for the last 1,000 years. Is that a wide enough focus for you, Frankopan? And so this is the medieval climate anomaly, which is mentioned as affecting the life of the California Indians, Native Americans, particularly from 800 to 1400. So 600 years. And you can see that it was a warm period on this graph. You can see after 1600, the little ice age and stuff that Ramses talked about. But my major point is that we're and David Klenick made this point when he was talking to us about paleontology and looking at a much bigger time frame. And the notion of global warming and global cooling is really, really complex. So what is it that affects our weather? Why we're just in this stable solar system? Why do things change so much? Well, it turns out we're not in a stable solar system. So this is my rationale to do a tangent and refer to the Monty Python Galaxy song, which I've sung for Pepper on our backpacking trip as we're out there looking up at the sky. And I'm going to propose with my good friend Rudy sitting next to me that we work it into our musical repertoire. So in the song, they say, hey, we're out here in an outer spiral arm and we're going at 40,000 miles an hour because we're moving, because the galaxy has a central point and it's rotating. Because we're 30,000 light years from galactic central point. We go around every 200 million years. That's about right. So we're changing all the time. And who knows what those influences are on our weather. I'm just kind of throwing this out as a total a novice and an amateur that just was blown away by these concepts. We're not in a stable situation here at all. Here we are in the outer spiral arm, and it's been revised. 30,000 light years is now 28,000. And I bring it up because there's this wonderful updated version of the Monty Python song with great visuals, just spectacular visuals, Hubble photographs and everything. So I highly recommend it. Now, David Pepper gets credit for this. He introduced me to the way the Earth really moves isn't in a circle around the sun. It's in spirals as we're dragged behind the sun. And it's a pretty, if you look at the animation, it'll blow your mind. I just picked 3 stills from the animation. So here's the sun in the outer spiral arm, going around the galactic central point and dragging the planets behind it. That's the gravity is just pulling us behind, and God knows as we're whipping around, we're exposed to all kinds of physical vectors and who knows what else. So this is a second view as you look at the sun with the trailing planets, and here we're ahead of the sun. So we see the sun's tail, and we see the planets flinging around. Okay, Frankopan, is that a broad enough scope? There's a wonderful YouTube of an animation of that David Pepper introduced me to. So thank you, David. The medieval climactic anomaly during these years, who knows what caused what or whether it was just correlated. But in addition to the California Indians, we saw the fall of the Mayans in this time period. We saw the Vikings emerge in this time period. And I'm going to show maps that'll posit that they were responding to global climate change. We've already seen that in California, it coincided with the Channel Island civilizations developing the Tamil canoe with the bow and arrow. And we saw, and the paleontologists have pointed out that there was increased warfare, looking at graves, increased disruption disease. This is David Klenick's territory. And more evidence of increased social stratification, given all the disruption. The trade with the inland. So there was a trade between the coastal and Native Americans and the inland ones. And the trade for obsidian just fell off. And no more pottery. Evidence of starvation. And why was that? Well, the deer starved too, and that robbed us of one of the animal protein sources. So, and during this period, we see it was an anomaly because there was both increased temperature and decreased temperature. There was flooding, there was droughts. It was unpredictable, as you'll see in the next slide. But in California, during this period, it was mostly droughts, 3 epic droughts. And so, as shown on this map, the Southwest during this anomaly was droughts. The red areas are droughts. But the Vikings, so in Northern Europe, it was colder. And so that may have been what drove the Vikings south. Just a theory. I can't back it up any further than that. Welcome back. Welcome back, Bruce. Sorry for the electricity problem. Now, how did the California Native Americans in the Bay Area do? They did better during this anomaly. And I say anomaly, but it seems like with the weather and and what David Klenick taught us when we were looking at paleontology, that a climactic disruption is not an anomaly. It's usual. You're getting these constant changes in the weather. And I think we're all getting in touch with that and towards, well, the end of my life. It seems like there's more disruption in the weather than there was before. But California, Bay Area Native Americans did much better during this so-called anomaly. And all this comes from the Canyon Oaks dig, which is near Pleasanton. Here's the dig. this map over here. Where is it? Yeah,
Black dot. Yeah.
right there. So, and what did they find? They found that there was no evidence of hunger in the burial sites, that the health was stable. And they think it maybe was delta fishing that provided a steady food source. And that would also apply to the shell fishing in the bay that created all those shell mounds. So, they also found an increased digestion of water fowl, birds, and estuary fish. And even the acorns, there was a loss, but less of a loss than elsewhere. One interesting sidelight on men versus women, looking at the bones of men, they were healthier, and the theory was that they did more of the fishing and snuck in more protein, whereas the women were still gathering. Just a theory. Now, if the Bay Area Native Americans did better, the coastal Southern Californian Native Americans did not better. They did worse. That there was a real distress on their maritime economy. They showed increased warfare, increased violence, decreased health, and that in that way they were similar to a lot of the whole American Southwest. So the Bay Area lucked out, and the reason for that is this southwestern coastal strip, this map of the climate zones that we covered when we were doing our climate talk. What was that, Carol? 6 months ago, 9 months ago. There's a really arid strip right along the coast, which is relevant today. So that's why this is all so important to go over. And how is it relevant? Well, LA, attracted a lot of people for the nice climate, but there wasn't much water. Now, Frankopan tells us that water may be a big question for the future. Well, it's already been a big question in California. And as we keep going with California history, it's going to be huge. And here, David Pepper will help me out, because he's delved into water in the western part of the United States too. But I just want to point out, this is one of the best maps that I have of the watersheds of California and the different color-coded developments, federal, state, local. And I threw up the poster for Chinatown, because one of the most notorious local developments was, of course, the development that LA did secretly of buying up land in the Owens Valley on the east side of the Sierras, and buying up all the water rights and then piping it down to LA. And when we get to the 19 teens, will know that this aqueduct was blown up by terrorists 13 times by by people pissed off in Owens Valley. Blew it up, this aqueduct. And that gives you a little bit of the background of the movie Chinatown. It's not a documentary, it's a drama. But there are characters in there. The water engineer for LA is in the movie. And he's the guy who took vacations to the Owens Valley and cased it out, and secretly just started, whenever land became available, he would secretly buy it. And before you knew it, LA owned all the water rights.
John, there's one really interesting thing to look at. If you look at the Bay Area, those two horizontal red lines are kind of unique, right, in the state. One is the McCallum River, which is the East Bay Municipal Water District, the top one, and the bottom one, of course, comes from Hetch Hetchy and feeds all of San Francisco. But it's quite unique in the rest of the state in that, you know, the Bay Area and San Francisco have kind of a direct feed where everybody else doesn't. And that creates a lot of politics either in the North Coast or the South Coast or LA or San Diego, because they don't have dedicated water.
Yeah. San Diego, Mike, we'll get to the San Diego story, but it's really interesting. The Hetch Hetchy ends at the Stanford campus. So yeah. you do a tour, and one of my housemates conducted a tour during our last reunion of the water at Stanford, and he goes to the pump that takes the natural flow Hetch Hetchy and pumps it up to San Francisco. Quite remarkable. Thanks for pointing that out, David. So yeah. We'll be coming back to this map over and over again, because the history of water in California is huge. And then one more story that I want to tell about water in California. It has to do with the Salton Sea. There used to be a Salton Sea tens of thousands of years ago, but that lake bed dried up. That was dry. And then, David Pepper has a great sketch. David, I'm stealing your thunder a little bit, but I found this one. Lake Powell, John Wesley Powell, God, what a character he was. He only, because of Civil War, he only had one arm, but he rafted down the Colorado with one arm. It's quite amazing. So he deserves to have a lake named after him, Lake Powell, that's for sure. But this shows the California river basin. And you're going to see here at the very bottom, this is why I mentioned San Diego, David, the All-American Canal comes off in Arizona, or near Arizona, or on the border, pretty damn close. I'm sure it was disputed. It certainly was disputed by the people in Mexico who were deprived of their share of. By the time it gets to Mexico, it's pretty dry.
There's no water that flows in the bottom parts of it, John.
Yeah,
and I think 37 million people are dependent on that water basin there. And the other thing San Diego's done is they have a desal plant, which is, they recognize, and those of us who've been in California long enough remember there was a plan in, I think, the 80s to tow an iceberg down from Alaska and put a straw into it. Water is a huge issue in California politics.
Yeah. One of our neighbors, Roy Austin, he's devoted he was an engineer, and he devoted the end of his life to fighting this idea of hauling water down, fresh water down from the north to the south. He lived up at
Sea Ranch.
Sea Ranch, Sea
yeah.
Ranch, and they were got involved in that somehow. But let me finish the Salton Sea story. So they developed this. I gotta move this over. They developed this all-American canal. And it came over, and they took it north to irrigate these fields here, and it worked. So the All-American Canal bought it over here and developed these fields for a couple of years, but within a short period of time, this was the Alamo Canal. The Alamo Canal silted up. And then there was a heavy rainfall and a snow melt that caused the Colorado to overrun at the intake cut in the bank of the river. So here I put with a red arrow where the intake cut would have been. And the intake cut was imperfect, and this man-made thing was just overwhelmed. And so the little opening and canal that they had built to channel the water was just inundated during this big flood from heavy snow melt. And so all this water came crashing down along the All-American Canal and gets to the Alamo Canal. And the Alamo Canal just totally fails. All the Colorado River flows up through this weak spot that had been dug by foolish human beings, hubristic human beings, just overwhelmed it and filled old washes from tens of thousands of years ago, and created this new river, and then the old Alamo River. So on either side of the Alamo Canal were now two rivers, all of that split the Colorado River, that was now totally diverted for 2 years and created the Salton Sea. And that was just 120 years ago. That was 120 years ago. And so it was unsustainable, basically, and at least the cuts that we made. And even the Palm Springs Life magazine calls it the biggest environmental disaster in California history. I'm sure we'll have many other candidates for environmental disasters in California history as we work our way through. But David Pepper has alerted me to the concept of mega droughts, and this mega drought that we're in is the worst in 1,200 years. And notice that 1,200 years would have been about the beginning of the medieval anomaly, climactic anomaly. But the droughts are so frequent now that each decade has its own drought. in the Southwest. So the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, 1950s had their own drought. The 21st century drought ended in 2014, but the drought that just ended a couple of months ago was a 20-year drought. So what have we learned? But the longest dry span that we had really just ended. And I just make the point one more time that it seems like climate change is the baseline. And the worst case scenario for drought in the American Southwest just keeps getting worse. Here's all the pleasure boats up at Lake Oroville. That's about all I have to say about climate, but I'll end with Frankopan and what he's doing with his new book. It's called The Earth Transformed, and he criticizes people who do history as chaps and maps. He's got my number. But I need the stories and I love the maps. But I think I'm in compliance with his larger aims, as I've tried to demonstrate, and particularly the history of California with its shifting land masses, subduction. California is totally created by new land that was sheared off the top of the Pacific plate as it dived underneath the continental plate. And human beings have adopted and molded to this evolving environment. Jim Teisel can probably fill us in as we go on that. But the history of the Holocene period with humans here 12,000 years ago, and there's been a lot of change. We've already talked about the water level and the coastline being 18 miles out at the Farallon Islands when humans first got here. But Frankopan, at least the review of Frankopan's book, emphasizes the water. In the future, will access to water be more important than access to mineral resources? The review asks. So I think we're in compliance by focusing as we have, not so much in the last year, but before that, before Putin invaded. When we started the history of California over a year ago. We did that, and as I said, we've got 6 hours in the library on climate and water and weather. So let me throw in this one. The Native Americans, they had a lower resisted to invasion, particularly on the South Coast. The deer population was down. Childhood mortality was high. We saw some resistance in our delta. Even so, we were still the most densely populated region on North America. And American immigrants to California were struck by the abundance of food and how well Native Americans blended nature with food for man. And Connie Loosely is an expert at that. I'm not sure she made it back on. But at some point, I want to ask her the difference between the Ohlonies and the Miwoks. So
I'm here, actually.
Okay, so let me do two more slides, and then you can give us the difference between Ohlone and Miwok.
Okay.
So California diversity, it's a metaphor. We're certainly going to hear a lot about that. 100 languages, 5,000 plants, 500 food sources, and then we have our three sisters: the nuts, the seeds, and the roots that interact with each other. Digging for roots aerates the soil, good for the seeds. The trees shade the seeds, and the acorns obviously need to survive. And I'll just say, California Indians, Native Americans, were dismissed as diggers by people like John Muir, who saw Native Americans digging and thought that they were just parasites on the land in a way. And digger was pejorative. But there's other uses for the digging of roots, and the Pomo basket weavers are world class. And they made baskets that could hold boiling water, which made pottery superfluous, in the same way that obsidian made metallurgy superfluous. So this was a picture of a Pomo Indian that I took out of this book, which I'm adding to the library of books that we have. So Connie, the difference between Ohlone and Miwok.
Well, the Miwok, as we know, were a nation of Indians who lived. The Ohlone is a combination of the leftover Indians after a lot of the missions, after so many died from the diseases from the missions, and after the rancheros chased some out. Anyway, a lot of the tribes were so split up and so devastated that they joined together and they formed a new nation of Indian. They made a name up. Basically, it was relatively recently, and that's the you don't find anybody who will claim they are a Miwok, a living Miwok, but they are a lot that are Ohlone.
Okay.
Ohlone is a combination of the different. So the Miwoks were actually very much, there were like 5 divisions of Miwoks: the coastal, the Sierra, the plains, and those all combined, along with some other stragglers of other tribes. So the Ohlone were not a nation of Indians.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Very, very good. Very good. So next time, God, I hope we'll have a session where electricity doesn't go out. I can't believe 2 weeks in a row. Time just at 2:00 on Tuesday. So I'll start next week by contrasting the Native American belief system with the Spanish belief system. And boy, oh boy, is there a big difference. All right. Any other
John,
questions?
by the way, I have a whole book of maps of the history of California if you want to borrow it. It's got all tremendous maps. Great big book,
Okay.
if you want to borrow it.
I do. Perfect.
Frankopan would say, maps?
Maps, chaps and maps.
Chaps and maps.
I'm still doing chaps. I'm sorry. I can't resist the stories of the chaps, and I can't resist the maps. Okay. If there are no other comments, I'll see y'all next week.
Okay.
Thank you,
Good.
John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Interesting.
John, I have a comment.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've come across Lake Tulare.
It rings a bell. Tell me, what are you thinking?
Okay, well, before a lot of whites came in, there was a huge lake that was filled by Kern and Kalia and other rivers that ultimately became the San Joaquin. But the lakes stretched like from Merced all the way down south of Bakersfield. It was a huge lake.
Wow.
And it so the whites came in and they found all the Indians along the shore of this lake, and there were some islands in the lake and so forth. And of course the natives then died of smallpox, and as they settled, they would take cattle and hogs to various islands and this and that. If you just go to Wikipedia and look at Lake Tulare or Tulare Islands is also a separate section, it's quite interesting because it transforms from the 1840s to something very different by 1870. And there was the huge flood of 1862, I think it was. But it then all got irrigated, went to irrigation and so forth. And it is, nothing like that anymore. But with all these rains, they're talking about, kind of the filling up what used to be Lake Tulare near the south and west of Visalia, I think it is. I don't know the geography there very well, but there are going to be big areas of water in those basins that were part of this huge lake when whites first came.
Yeah, but before they do that, they've got to recharge the underground water, right?
Well, yeah, it'll all settle out, if you pardon the terminology.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Jen. That was interesting. Okay, anything else?
John, just a quick one for you. Our Janet kind of pointed, she was over here with a meeting with Kristen a day yesterday, I guess, and she kind of pointed over her shoulder to where, do you live up in White Cliff area, or where is your power outage?
So we're right near John Muir Hospital.
Oh, okay.
And we were living under the illusion that our area of the grid would never go out because of John Muir Hospital. That that we would be triply reinforced. We've learned that that's not true.
That's not true. That's right. They have big generators there, I guess, huh?
Well, we've never had an outage that was a planned outage. In other words, PG&E doesn't ever turn us off because of a brownout or anything. But when the trees go down, these windstorms have been actually knocking over power poles. It's crazy.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
I feel like I'm living in an anomaly.
That's great. Yeah, we're in South Walnut Creek, so that's kind of in the White Cliff. There's a little area of unincorporated area of Walnut Creek
yeah, I think there are some caves back there, right, Connie?
In the White Cliff area? Yeah, well, there are a few in the open space.
Yeah, I think it is it James Benny? Is he's kind of trying to get some interest into those caves that are up there in the open spaces. So on Mount Diablo.
Yeah.
so Bruce, maybe you could lead us up to one of those caves.
Maybe in my next lifetime.
Okay.
Good deal. Sorry for being late, but I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you could make it.
So, good deal. Look forward to next week.
Yeah, see y'all next week.
Okay.
Good. Thank you, John.
Bye-bye, John.